Libya's staggering death toll this Thursday night, the scope of the disaster.
It has something that we've never seen before.
And the measure that could have helped save lives. Red flags about a stabbing suspect's released from a psychiatric hospital. Global News obtains the BC Review Board's decision and new details about the man's violent past. A recycling facility up in flames, the worried neighbors, and the warning to an entire city. Plus, the truth is out there.
Oh my gosh.
The results of NASA's UFO study and the plan for new investigations.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. In Libya, families are searching for loved ones and finding only bodies. The rush of water from collapsed dams ripped away entire neighborhoods, and the number of dead has now reached a staggering 11,300. This drone footage shows the force of the water's destructive path in the port city of Derna. City officials fear the death toll could reach 20,000, one-fifth of that city's population. The UN said today lives could have been saved had early warning and emergency management systems functioned properly in Libya. As Redmond Shannon reports, the concern right now is burying all the bodies and getting aid to the survivors.
Removing bodies from the rubble and mud, one by one. The Mediterranean waves washing many victims back to shore as crews remove piles of debris. Aid workers help wounded survivors, almost all of them grieving. This Red Crescent worker says he believes the number of deaths is now above 11,000. The city's mayor fears the final figure could be almost double that. Most of this avoidable, according to the United Nations Weather Agency.
If there would have been a normally operating meteorological service, they could have issued the warnings and also the emergency management authorities would have been able to carry out evacuation.
Years of conflict have destroyed most aspects of a proper functioning government and created added dangers this ruined city could do without.
Exploded ordnance, mines, etc., that have been swept away across town, and they are now scattered everywhere, and that is a disaster.
Aid agencies are doing what they can in the conditions. The spread of disease, a growing threat.
This area is impoverished and has been underfunded for years, and Libya in general has been underfunded for years.
Migrants from other parts of Africa still came to Derna for work or to cross to Europe. This Sudanese man says he knows around 14 families who were swept away after the dams gave way. The destroyed structures, a growing focus of anger. There are reports scheduled maintenance work on them was never carried out. Online, Libyans are sharing a poem. It's called The Rain, and its words are resonating with people, particularly now. It includes the passage, "The rain exposes the drenched streets, the cheating contractor and the failed state," articulating the anger of Libyans who feel ignored and abandoned. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Morocco's king held a cabinet meeting today to discuss reconstruction efforts after the powerful earthquake there nearly a week ago. The royal palace says it will provide shelter and financial aid up to $18,000 for affected households. At least 50,000 homes have been damaged, many more destroyed. Rebuilding has begun in parts of Marrakesh that are popular with tourists, but it's a monumental task. In more remote areas, people are still living in makeshift tents as crews dig to recover bodies. Aid is trickling in, but it's slow going and not enough. About 3,000 people died when the earthquake hit September 8th. A small island in Italy is being overwhelmed by thousands of migrants who have arrived in a flotilla of boats. In the span of 48 hours, about 120 rickety boats arrived from North Africa carrying 7,000 people to Italy's southernmost island of Lampedusa. That island has a population of just over 6,000. Humanitarian groups are struggling to provide food and shelter, and the Coast Guard is now relocating some migrants to Sicily. Nearly 124,000 migrants have reached Italy by sea this year, roughly double the number compared to the same time last year. Global News has obtained an independent review board decision about the suspect in a triple stabbing in Vancouver's Chinatown. The man had been given an unescorted day pass from a psychiatric hospital, despite a review in April finding he posed a significant threat to the public. And tonight, BC's Premier launched a formal investigation into the matter. Neetu Garcha reports.
Vancouver's Chinatown community is shaken after 3 people were stabbed at a special celebration on Sunday.
When I turned around, he missed my back and then got on my arm.
Very personal. Yeah, we'd worked very hard to put this festival on, to bring community together.
Police said the suspect was out on an unescorted day pass from a local psychiatric hospital. Blair Evan Donnelly has a history of knife attacks, including in the stabbing death of his 16-year-old daughter in 2006. On Thursday, BC's Premier announced a review led by a former police chief.
The core question of how a violent, psychotic individual was released into community to attack innocent people is the question that needs to be answered.
Global News has obtained a British Columbia Review Board decision from April, citing the board concluded he continues to meet the threshold of significant threat. It says he was diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder. The decision also highlights Donnelly didn't show any apparent signs of mental deterioration before the fatal attack on his daughter. The document says the 2009 incident was abrupt and without warning. It happened after he consumed cocaine. In 2017, he suddenly attacked another patient in his unit with a butter knife.
To me, it reads like a dire warning letter from medical professionals within the hospital.
The decision says staff failed to properly supervise Donnelly when he was in a program for people reintegrating into the community in 2021 and 2022.
This is where the BC Review Board and this director failed Donnelly, failed the public, and also failed their own medical professionals and staff.
So the big question remains, how was Donnelly able to go on an unescorted leave, and how will the public, including the victims of the weekend stabbings, be assured it won't happen again? Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced another measure he says will help tackle the housing crisis. The GST will be removed from the construction of new rental buildings. It's something the Liberals had promised to do in the past. Mackenzie Gray looks at what difference it could make now in the construction of apartments and the Liberals' political fortunes.
The Liberal caucus publicly united over the Prime Minister's new housing pitch.
Pleased to announce that we are going to be removing the federal GST for the construction of new apartment buildings, and I'm encouraging all provinces to do the same.
Focusing on new purpose-built rentals, a plan to spur constructors spooked to the sidelines by high interest rates and drive down prices.
We're going to see more apartments go up instead of condominiums that'll be rented out or held onto without somebody living in them. And we tend to see that apartments rent for a couple $100 less every month.
The program is effective immediately, but the impacts will take time.
This GST cut on purpose-built rental will build at least 200,000 purpose-built rentals, just based on the number of projects that we've seen delayed due to high interest rates.
Those apartments will only put a small dent in the 3.5 million additional units the Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation says are needed to restore affordability.
We keep incentivizing regular Canadians to be bidding up the price of what already has been built. And so we've got to come in and say, with what's already been built, our goal is for those things to no longer rise.
The GST rebate isn't a new idea. The Liberals pitched it back in their 2015 election platform, dropped the proposal in 2017, but have dusted it back off today in a bid to claw back the political narrative from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's populist and popular housing message.
After 8 years of Justin Trudeau, 9 in 10 young people say they will never be able to afford a home.
Those attacks have translated into a 15-point Conservative advantage, but fresh housing proposals could lead to a Liberal leap.
What the Liberals can do that the Conservatives can't do is they're in government right now, so they can start implementing some policies right now that can start helping Canadians.
The Prime Minister also announced top grocery store CEOs will be summoned to Ottawa to explain high prices, and small businesses also got a break, Donna, with an extension of the Canada Emergency Business Account Repayment Program.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in London, Ontario. Thanks. There's another increase in E. coli cases linked to that outbreak at Calgary daycares. 329 cases have now been confirmed. Most of the sick are children. And parents have written an open letter to the Alberta Premier, Danielle Smith. They're asking why they haven't heard from her beyond a single tweet since the outbreak began. Now is when we need to know the leadership Albertans voted for will step up, the letter states, and it asks what the government will do to protect its most vulnerable citizens. Alberta's health minister said today a thorough investigation into the central kitchen of the daycares at the center of the outbreak is underway, but an exact source of the outbreak still hasn't been identified.
Was it the food handling? Was it the food itself? Was it some lack of stringent cleanliness? There are many factors that could have played into this. Right. I don't want to speculate. We have to let the inspectors do their job and really determine what the issue was.
The outbreak was officially declared 11 days ago. It is one of the worst food-related E. coli outbreaks in Canada. Huge plumes of potentially hazardous smoke clouded the skies over St. John, New Brunswick today as crews work to contain a large fire at a scrapyard and recycling plant in that city's harbor. As Natalie Sturgeon reports, people nearby are being warned to avoid the smoke.
St. John residents watch as a fire rages at the American Iron and Metal facility. The fire broke out around 1 a.m. and crews have been battling it for more than 12 hours. Incident Commander and Fire Chief Kevin Clifford said the fire is rooted deep within a pile of crushed cars, but says it's too early to say how the fire started.
I do feel at this point we're beginning to make progress, and probably up to an hour ago, I didn't have that sense. So I think we are beginning to make progress.
Flames could be seen shooting several hundred meters in the air Thursday morning, with large amounts of black smoke billowing out of the crushed pile of cars. Public Health says that plume is likely filled with chemicals and contaminants, and anyone who sees or smells smoke should shelter in place.
If you are elderly, very young, and anyone that's living with cardiovascular or lung health conditions, this is a very concerning event.
American Iron and Metal is a scrap metal recycling facility that has had issues in the past with large explosions and 2 workplace deaths. Residents nearby are concerned as homes are mere meters from the site.
It seems pretty big. I don't know, they keep seeming to have issues with this place. I'm fully supportive of recycling and stuff, but it is pretty close to a lot of homes.
Andrew Miller says the fact the fire has been burning for so long worries him. Fire Chief Kevin Clifford said that fire may have been burning for several hours before smoke became noticeable, and it may be until Friday morning before it's considered contained. Global News reached out to American Iron and Metal for comment, but has yet to hear back. Natalie Sturgeon, Global News, St. John, New Brunswick.
A hurricane is heading for New England and Atlantic Canada, and people are warned to brace for dangerous conditions. On its path right now, Hurricane Lee is set to arrive over the Maritimes on Saturday. It will approach as a Category 1 hurricane, and heavy rain and wind gusts of up to 120 kilometers an hour are forecast. Hurricane and tropical storm watches are already in effect in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Hitting the brakes on work coming up, why unionized American auto workers are poised to go on strike. More than 140,000 American auto workers could be on strike as early as midnight tonight. The United Auto Workers Union is in negotiations with Detroit's big 3 automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. The workers are demanding higher wages, better job protection, and benefits, and all of this is being closely watched by the Canadian Auto Workers Union, who could take similar job action next week. Eric Sorensen reports.
U.S. auto workers say they're not bluffing. After years of making concessions and falling behind the cost of living, they're ready to strike within hours at different plants for the big 3 U.S. automakers.
We are preparing to strike these companies in a way they've never seen before. We're still very far apart on our key priorities.
On wages alone, the UAW wants 40% or more over 4 years. And the union says Ford, GM, and Stellantis are offering 17 to 20% in separate negotiations. Ford's CEO is frustrated.
If there is a strike, it won't be because we didn't put a great deal in front of them, because we have.
150,000 U.S. workers could be on picket lines.
We don't want to break our company, but we also want to be paid for our fair wages.
As U.S. employees rev their engines for a walkout tonight, Canadian workers are idling for their moment that could come just 4 days later. Unifor is targeting Ford specifically. 5,700 workers in Oakville and elsewhere will be in a strike position early Tuesday. The union wants higher wages, improved pension benefits, and job security, especially as the industry transitions increasingly to making e-vehicles. The tone here has been less strident.
Obviously, we're focused on getting our own agreement here, and we have our own strategy. We wouldn't have selected Ford as a target if we didn't feel confident about where we could get to.
But even a strike just in the U.S. would affect the auto industry here.
We send a lot of parts to the U.S. They send a lot of parts to us. It's integrated production line. These are supply chains. And so effects in the factories in the U.S. will certainly affect the ability to make cars in Canada.
And says Waverman, a strike in both countries would have a much greater impact on the economy, as auto contracts in the U.S. and Canada expire almost simultaneously for the first time in a generation. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Hunter Biden, the son of American President Joe Biden, has been indicted on firearms charges. Biden has been charged with 3 criminal counts. He's accused of lying about his drug use when he bought a firearm in October 2018 and for possessing a gun while he was addicted to drugs. A plea agreement on Biden's tax and gun charges fell apart in July. This is the first ever indictment of a sitting U.S. president's child. Still ahead, why women from Canada who joined ISIS rarely face criminal charges. The so-called Islamic State is notorious for its killings and terror attacks. About 100 Canadians are suspected of leaving Canada to join ISIS. Around 20 of them are women, many of whom were captured and put in camps in Syria. Several have since been arrested and brought home. A Global News investigation has found, unlike their male counterparts, they've rarely faced criminal charges. Jeff Semple explains why.
These Yazidi refugees arrived in Canada a few years ago from Iraq, where they faced a genocide from the so-called Islamic State. Hadia says her husband was beheaded in front of her. She and their daughters held as slaves.
They was beating us. They was giving garbage food to us. Like the food they was giving to us, it was glass in the food.
And she says some of their worst ISIS abusers were women.
The women, what they did with Yazidis gross. Actually, they worse than the men.
It's illegal to leave Canada to support a terrorist group, and dozens of Canadian men have been charged. But so far, only one woman is accused of supporting ISIS.
Women played all kinds of roles in ISIS.
This national security law expert partly blames gender stereotypes, portraying women as innocent victims.
The colloquial term you often uses chick discount, that women are presumed to be not capable of engaging in terrorist activities. And if they do, it's because they've been duped, they've been manipulated.
This is, pretty strong evidence.
Leah West traveled to Syria with Global News a few years ago and interviewed Canadian ISIS women following their arrests, including Kimberly Pullman.
I'm not above the line.
At that time, Pullman said she was prepared to face justice in Canada. She's now living in BC and challenging a peace bond, which limits her travel and internet use, but no criminal punishment.
Charges and prosecution of terrorism offenses is actually a strong deterrent for future terrorist activity. So the fact that Canada isn't doing that in this space, I think sends the wrong kind of message.
This security analyst notes Germany, the US, and the UK have prosecuted dozens of women.
A lot of our allies are really leading the way, and Canada, I would say, is more of a laggard on this front.
We are very scared.
This Yazidi family says they're still receiving threatening messages from ISIS. They're calling on the government to protect them and prosecute all of their alleged abusers. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Explaining the inexplicable. Next, why NASA is taking on the hunt for UFOs. Maybe they're out there, maybe they're not. Well, now NASA is taking on the case. It's taking the lead in investigating unidentified anomalous phenomena, what we used to call UFOs. As Jackson Prosco explains, NASA intends to share information without fueling speculation.
Though no one knows what this is,
there's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
gosh.
NASA now says it's sure of what it's not.
The NASA independent study team did not find any evidence that UAP have an extraterrestrial origin. But we don't know what these UAP are.
NASA's first report into UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena, outlined how the space agency plans to investigate the unknown, appointing its first ever UAP research director to look into hundreds of sightings.
UAP are one of our planet's greatest mysteries.
Just this week, Mexican officials held their own UAP hearing, displaying the alleged remains of two ancient non-humans.
That's above special.
While in July in Washington, there were blockbuster claims of a secret government program to recover alien UAPs.
Biologics came with some of these recoveries. Non-human, and that was the assessment.
Alas, there's no hard proof.
We want to shift the conversation about UAPs from sensationalism to science.
They've already made up their mind, basically, with regard to this issue, and that is a little disturbing to us.
Believers in alien visitors are some of NASA's biggest skeptics. The agency won't release the name of its new UAP research director, adding rocket fuel to claims of a cover-up.
It's really instructive that NASA has chosen to protect these people, not from being harassed or whatever, but from relieving themselves of the truth.
If the truth is out there, NASA promises it will make it public, regardless of whether the answers come from this world or another one. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada is Emerald Lake in Yoho National Park, BC. Thanks for watching. Farah Nasser will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I will see you again on Monday. Bye-bye.